Welcome to URL Unzip, Reboot, and Leave, a podcast about the psychology that moves us. Through real conversations with thinkers, doers, and seekers, we explore how we adapt, evolve, and find meaning. So let's unzip, reboot, and leave.
Indian name is Anita because when I first started going to India, it was a very difficult name to pronounce. People just started calling me Internet. In early 2000, I was like, no, let's just go with Anita. So feel free to call me Anita because I know that Antoinette is very difficult to pronounce.
Thank you for your time, Professor Antoinette DeNapoli, but I will call you Anita. Dr. Anita, how are you today?
I am well. Hello, Gautam. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. And we should start here because today we will talk about the study of Hindu goddesses and female gurus from your ethnography lens. Okay. And this is the first time I'm interviewing someone who studied ethnography. So thank you.
Well, I'm honored.
So the first question is, please tell me about your research on Hindu goddesses and female gurus and what drew you to study that religious authority.
Absolutely. I'm Antoinette DeNapoli, the John F. Weatherly Professor of Religion and Chair of the Religion Department at Texas Christian University, where I specialize in South Asian religions, especially Hinduism. I'm an ethnographer who works closely with female gurus and renouncers in India to understand how they navigate male-dominated religious institutions and use their authority to push for greater dignity, equality, and flourishing for women. I'm the author and editor of 3 books, and currently I'm completing my 4th book titled Female Gurus and Grassroots Feminism, The Modern Struggle for Gender Equality in Hindu Society. The information that I share today is being drawn from my book, Female Gurus and Grassroots Feminism. So to answer your question, when people ask what I study, I often begin with a scene rather than a definition. So allow me to take a few moments and lead us, as well as our viewers, in an act of mental migration. Mental migration is a term that my now retired colleague and fellow South Asianist, Andy Fort, he coined it. So we're standing at the Triveni Sangam, the confluence of the Ganga, Yamuna, and subterranean Saraswati rivers in Prayagraj, a sacred city in Uttar Pradesh, North India, where I've spent the last 12 years conducting research with female gurus. It's just before dawn during the Kumbh Mela. The fog sits low on the water, loudspeakers in the distance are blaring bhajans, and I'm walking behind a small procession led by a woman in saffron robes. Let's call her Mataji, respected mother. She's holding a 3-foot metal trident in her hand. Her clothing is wrapped to leave one shoulder bare, and her hair is tied up in a tight jata with top knot. Behind her trail a cluster of women, some in faded cotton saris, some in bright synthetic clothing, a few in cheap shawls against the winter chill, and some are barefoot. Many of these women are poor, some are survivors of domestic violence, and some are simply looking for a life beyond what they call the 4 walls of the house. So in that moment, what drew me and has kept me in this work becomes very clear. I'm interested in what happens when women step into roles that were imagined for men, roles such as guru, ascetic, or sadhu, and monastic head. And I'm interested in what happens when women not only step into these roles, but do so in the name of goddesses who embody cosmic power. How do they use religious language, emotion, and ritual to claim authority and dignity in settings that remain structurally patriarchal? How do they create new possibilities for women at the grassroots? And what kind of tensions and ethical strains emerge in the process? My research began with female renouncers, also known as sadhus, in Rajasthan. And it's grown into a broader project on Hindu goddesses and female gurus in contemporary South Asia. I'm trained as an ethnographer of religion, so my method is relational and long-term. That means I live with female renouncers, share their kitchens and sleeping spaces, attend rituals, travel on buses and trains to pilgrimage sites, record their songs and conversations, and increasingly follow their online presence on Facebook and YouTube. Ethnography, as I use the term, means that knowledge is built over years of conversation, conflict, care, and sometimes silence. It's not just what happens in a single interview. Early on, I realized that most scholarship took the male guru and the male sadhu as the normative template. and that women appeared mainly as exceptions or followers. I wanted to reverse that gaze. I wanted to put women at the center and ask, how do women inhabit and remake these roles? And I'm speaking specifically about roles such as guru, sadhu, and monastic head. What kinds of authority do they claim? Do they talk about suffering, inequality, and rights? Where do those claims rub up against institutional limits? Over time, my work has focused on two sets of questions. First, questions of authority and leadership. So, for example, I asked, how do female gurus like Mataji, whom I began with the vignette, who lives in Prayagraj, or female gurus like Swamini, who lives in Nepal? And these are women that I've written about in my earlier work. So how do female gurus come to see themselves and be seen by others as Shankaracharyas, that is, as monastic heads, leading monastic institutions in a lineage that has for 1,200 years been exclusively male and Brahmin? I ask, what role do revelation, dreams, bodily sensations, and emotions, such as what I call radical love, play in their way of life? And how does digital media, whether it be videos or interviews or music clips, allow them? How does digital media allow them to reach new publics and shape Hinduism from the ground up? Second, my work is focused on questions of gender, justice, and grassroots feminism. In my more recent work, meaning work that I've published from 2014 onwards, I argue that female gurus are not just spiritual leaders, not at all. They are more than that. They're what I would call religious feminist influencers who leverage their charisma and goddess-centric theology to push for equal rights for female sadhus and laywomen. These rights include rights to leadership positions, to safety from violence, to education, and to economic security. Their activism is grassroots, meaning it grows out of concrete relationships with poor women, survivors, and devotees, and it's religious, meaning it speaks the language of dharma, Shakti, and seva, rather than only the language of secular law. So when I say that I study Hindu goddesses and female gurus, what I really mean is that I study how Hindu women use the resources of their religions, whether it be goddess myths, ritual practice, ascetic discipline, and charismatic experience. How they use these resources to contest the idea that men alone should define what is normal in Hindu spiritual life. And I do this through ethnography, through thick relational description that holds together the beauty and the pain, the empowerment and the constraint, the tradition and the experimentation that shape women's religious leadership today.
So Hindu tradition centers around these Durga, Kali, Lakshmi, these goddesses who embody Shakti or divine power. How does this rich goddess theology shape the way women you work, and especially with their own authority, dignity, and rights?
Absolutely. So in the communities I study, there is a rich goddess-centric theology involving goddesses such as Durga, Kali, Parvati, Gayatri, Saraswati, Lakshmi. These goddesses are not simply in the background. They're active resources that the female gurus and their devotees and their disciples draw on just to make claims like this, to say, we are not secondary. Our lives, our labor, and our leadership are part of the divine order. To deny that is not just unfair, it's adharma. So, but one of the most common questions I get from whether it's religious specialists, whether it's students, most commonly from students, is the question of, does goddess worship automatically lead to gender equality? And what a great question that is. Students often ask me if Hindus, because I teach a dedicated class on Hindu goddess traditions of India. And students ask, well, if Hindus worship powerful goddesses like Kali and Durga, for instance, the fierce warrior goddesses, doesn't that mean women are already equal? So my answer is, it's more complicated. So picture Navaratri at Mataji's temple. The room is packed. The air is thick with incense and the sound of drums. The clay image of Durga is dazzling. She's dressed in a red sari. She has her many arms, her lion at her feet. Women come forward one by one to bow, some with bruises hidden under their sleeves, some clutching school certificates for their daughters as offerings of hope. They call Durga Ma, mother. They cry, they tell stories of miracles, perhaps a sickness cured, a drunken husband sobered. I've heard lots of those stories. A court case finally resolved. In those moments, goddess devotion clearly sustains women. It gives them a language of power and protection. It offers a divine female figure who stands above the men who hurt or disregard them. But here's the thing, Gautam. When the ritual ends and the women step back onto the street, the structures that shape their lives have not automatically changed. Their husbands still control the wages. The in-laws still police their movements. Most monastic councils and temple boards are still overwhelmingly male. So I would say this: goddess worship creates possibilities, but it doesn't guarantee outcomes. Where goddess devotion does support what I would call grassroots feminism is when women themselves inhabit goddess imagery and use it to push institutions. So, for instance, when Mataji in Prayagraj compares herself to Durga, she doesn't mean, I'm a nice metaphor. What she means is, as Durga leads the divine army, leads a female army of sadhus. As Durga restores cosmic balance, she is here, Mataji is here, to restore women's glory in Hindu monastic life. So Mataji takes the martial aspect of Durga very seriously. Her trident, her stance, and notice, Durga holds a trident. And I began this interview with a vignette showing Mataji carrying her. So Durga's trident, Durga's stance, her refusal to submit to the male gods. Okay? So Mataji takes all of these aspects very seriously. And she uses Durga's own embodiment of femininity to challenge the idea that women should be content as junior renouncers or temple workers. Now, here's the thing. I've been working with female gurus and sadhus, not only, but in addition to working with male gurus and male sadhus. And I've been doing this for 24 years, 25 years. So in that time, I've met male gurus who preside over grand Durga pujas and then tell me in the same breath that women cannot be true gurus because their bodies are impure, their minds too emotional. These male gurus venerate the goddess while still policing real women's bodies and voices. So that's the disjuncture that I'm interested in understanding how women make sense of it. Women like the female gurus and ascetics I work with. So my answer is that goddess worship can be a resource for gender equality, for women claiming their right to dignity, to respect, to equal opportunities in the topmost leadership positions. So goddess worship can be a resource, especially when women claim it for themselves and link it to institutional demands. But we make a mistake when we assume that the presence of goddesses in myth or ritual automatically translate into justice for women in the home, the workplace, or the monastery. The work of connecting those dots, i.e. the disjuncture that I pointed out, is precisely what grassroots religious feminists are doing. Grassroots religious feminists or feminist religious influencers like Mataji, like Swamini, like Anandmaya Guru Ma, whom I also met at a Kumbh Mela in 2019. So they're the ones who are doing the grassroots religious feminism. And their feminism is contested every step of the way.
Like, okay, this is my statement. Okay. What I'm hearing is kind of because in India, the societal structure is not very transparent and clean. We probably need this kind of a layer of mystic superpower or something which kind of give human or this depressed like clan or this woman kind of a hope, strength towards life, towards future. That's what I'm hearing. I mean,
absolutely, that cosmic dimension.
Yeah.
That cosmic dimension with female gurus like Mataji and Swamini claiming to be called by the goddess, that cosmic dimension of their feminism is essential. And I can talk more about cosmic feminism if you'd like.
Yes, please, because that's the word in my next question I was about to ask you. What is this cosmic feminism?
Yeah, so now that you've asked me about cosmic feminism, I want to do two things. I want to give credit where it's due and explain how I'm reworking the term in a very specific place. So the phrase cosmic feminism comes from political theorist Kathy Ferguson's book, The Man Question, where she describes feminist visions of the self that are grounded in a larger natural or spiritual cosmos rather than in some sort of idea of an autonomous individual. So in Ferguson's account, a cosmic feminist subject is relational, embedded, and oriented to a web of connections that exceeds human law and human markets. So I borrow that language because it captures something very important about the women I work with. So gurus like Mataji and Swamini, as you observe, do not ground their authority primarily in legal training, institutional office, or electoral politics. What do they ground it in? is revelation and a cosmic order suffused with Shakti. They speak of dreams and visions at sacred places, whether it be the Sangam in Prayagraj or Pashupatinath in Nepal, where the goddess or god appears directly and ordains them to lead. So when Mataji narrates her call, she doesn't say, I fought my way up the institutional ladder. She's never said that. What she says is, in a flash of lightning, Durga and Shiva came and told me, quote, you will be the female Shankaracharya of India, end quote. So Mataji understands that experience as a cosmic initiation, an alternative diksha that outruns the male-controlled ritual process. So her title is secured in her telling, not by a council of Brahmin scholars, but by the gods themselves. So that experience is what I'm trying to name cosmic feminism, a mode of feminist religious activism that situates women's struggles over authority, dignity, equality in a cosmic narrative. Women are not only arguing that they should be equal for pragmatic or legal reasons. They're saying that the very fabric of the universe is out of balance when women are held down, that the goddess is calling them to set it right. But I also use cosmic feminism to highlight tensions, not just to celebrate spiritual feminism. So think of it this way. When authority is framed as a direct mandate from the cosmos, it can be difficult to question. If the guru is Durga in human form, what does it mean to disagree with her? If her leadership is described as the will of the divine, the will of God, the will of goddess, how do disciples voice objections without feeling like they are violating dharma, without feeling like they're being impious? So in my ethnography, I explore cases where women who raised concerns about resources or the direction in which the monastic organization was going, they were told they were resisting the goddess's plan. So that's where cosmic feminism shows its double edge, and sometimes it can be razor sharp. That the same cosmic frame that empowers some female gurus, to overturn male monopolies on leadership can also be used to silence dissent and concentrate power in a single divinely authorized figure. So for me, cosmic feminists, adding that cosmic frame to an understanding of how one came to be, who they are, and occupy the position they hold, and even command the respect and reverence they command, such as female gurus do. So for me, cosmic feminism is useful not because it's just uplifting, although it is that too, but because it helps us see how women's empowerment and new forms of discipline are woven together when religious authority is justified in cosmic, goddess-centric terms.
So that means this dominant Brahminical model, which is typical male dominated, organized, monastic, institutionalized approach, whereas these females are kind of a feminine, like with connection, community care. And you term this domestication of renunciation. Can you please explain a little bit on that?
Absolutely. So my earlier work in Rajasthan focused on women renouncers who were not famous gurus. They were just local sadhus. Many of them were singers, bhajan singers. So I coined the phrase domesticating renunciation way back in 2013 to describe how these women particularly reworked classical ideas of sannyasa, renunciation. So in Brahminical models, renunciation is often imagined as a sharp break, meaning leaving home, leaving family, entering an ashram, or even the forest. For the women I lived with, renunciation was less about exiting domesticity and more about refashioning it. So as sadhus, they cooked, they cleaned, they cared for others, but they did so as renunciants, not as housewives. So they turned the tasks of home, which include feeding, nurturing, singing to the gods established in the home shrine, things that just, you do because it's what being a woman means and in the traditional framework of householding. So they turned those tasks into ascetic practices and sources of authority. So the sadhus I worked with, let's say Gangagiri, for instance, she would say things like, we have renounced for God, so every roti we cook is an offering, every bhajan we sing is a prayer. They gathered women in courtyards for bhajan sessions that doubled as spaces of emotional support and even small-scale organizing. So in that sense, the sadhus, they domesticated renunciation, by which I mean they made ascetic life look and feel like an expanded household oriented around devotion and love. Now, in my recent work, I see something similar, but on a larger scale with gurus like Mataji, Swamini, Anandmai. And what I mean is they present their mutts or monastic learning centers, monasteries. They present their mutts as extended households. They call themselves Jagat Mata, mother of the world, and they blend the roles of guru, activist, and householder. They feed, they educate, shelter hundreds, okay? They also hold the highest titles in the monastic hierarchy, Shankaracharya, the master teacher. That's the highest title in the rabbinical tradition. What's changed is that now I pay more attention to how this domestication of renunciation intersects with the politics of authority. So the language of family and care is incredibly powerful. And of course, it allows women to claim leadership by saying, look, who better to guide and protect than a mother? It reassures followers that the guru's power is nurturing, not threatening. It helps women to step into spaces that might otherwise be seen as aggressively masculine. But family is not only a metaphor of love, it's also a metaphor of hierarchy and obligation. Mothers can be self-sacrificing and tender. They can also be strict, punitive, or partial. Sisters and daughters within a household can form deep solidarities, but they can also be rivals for attention and resources. So when a guru calls her order a monastic order, or otherwise known as an akara, okay, when she calls her order a family and herself its mother, as religious studies scholars, what I ask is, who is included? Who's left out? Who gets to speak? Who must remain silent for the sake of the family? In some of the conflicts I document in my book, women who challenged decisions were told they were like disobedient daughters or trouble-making in-laws, okay? That, the daughter-in-law, the bahu, the sas-bahu relationship, daughter-in-law, mother-in-law. Some of these women were told that they were like trouble-making daughter-in-laws who threatened household harmony. So the domestication of renunciation, in other words, can blur lines between spiritual kinship and managerial control. So bringing my earlier insights about connection, community, and care that are elements of this domestication of renunciation, bringing those earlier insights into dialogue with this newer work on charismatic authority and cosmic feminism helps me see both the beauty and the danger in the maternal framing of leadership. So it honors the real labor of women who have turned the ashram into a place of refuge. And it pushes us to ask how feminist leadership might cultivate care without also collapsing dissent into disloyalty or heresy.
Okay. In your field work, how do these male religious leaders and institutions respond to this claim of equality by women gurus? The reason I'm asking this because when we see, yes, there are a lot of educated, there are a lot of literally enlightened beings are into that spiritual space, but there are a lot of uneducated, just money-making game kind of fraud personalities are also there. So how, and definitely there will be a clash with this like female leadership with those. So how they is it how this backlash or this or it's a strategic accommodation or cooperation or just like get rid of them? What is your experience?
So the reactions of male religious leaders and institutions, and I've had opportunities to talk with male Shankaracharyas, male monastic leaders, male heads, male sadhus. I mean, all the, from the Shankaracharya all the way to just a regular sadhu. I've talked with men in the course of my research because you can't really understand the role and impact of gendered experience unless you're talking to both men and women. So the reactions of male religious leaders and institutions to women's claims, they're not, first of all, I want to say they're not monolithic. They range from outright hostility to cautious endorsement, often in the same person over time. So some responses are bluntly exclusionary. For instance, in Swamini's case, she's the one in Nepal. All male bodies of Brahmin scholars ultimately rejected her candidacy for Shankaracharya despite her qualifications and support from some high-ranking male gurus. The message was clear. There is a line they will not yet allow a woman to cross within the core of the traditional structure. Yet, there are also more subtle forms of resistance. I've heard male gurus say, yes, women are powerful. Nari Shakti. Yes, we honor the goddess, but the order of things is such that women should serve, not lead. Some gurus gave like the metaphor of like the man is the head and the women are the hands. So, or some male gurus will grant women symbolic roles, allowing them to perform certain rituals at public events while keeping decision making firmly in the hands of men. So at the same time, there are male leaders who see benefits in supporting women's leadership. Aligning with a female guru, particularly a charismatic one, enhances their own image as progressive. It attracts women devotees, and it appeals to media narratives about first female achievements. They may attend a women's installation ceremony. I've seen this happen in Delhi with male gurus. So they attend a women's installation ceremony, they praise her publicly, and then they use that association in their own branding. I've seen that quite a bit, even as they stop short of altering their own institutional succession. Then there is what we might call strategic accommodation. Male authorities agree to limited inclusion, allocating separate spaces for women at the Kumbh Mela, such as the Mai Bara, originally called in 2013, or now is known as the Ma Shakti camp or Ma Ki Shakti camp, allowing women to join certain akhadas in junior roles, permitting women to speak on specific topics while maintaining control over core structures, like property, high titles, doctrinal authority. So that method diffuses the pressure, but it doesn't really surrender much power, does it? So the female gurus are acutely aware of these dynamics. These are keenly intelligent women. They tailor their appeals accordingly. Sometimes they emphasize continuity. Mataji has said, look, we're not against tradition, we're restoring it. A bicycle needs two wheels. Sometimes they invoke the language of national pride. India will be honored when our daughters can lead. So they navigate a landscape where male appeal can open doors, but it can also domesticate their change. So male responses in my work are not simply for or against women's equality. That would be, a simplistic way to understand it. The men's responses are patterned by interests, anxieties, and shifting public pressures. So the result is a field of partial gains, setbacks, ongoing negotiation. There is no linear story of progress, not at all.
So the last question to you is, looking ahead, how do you see women's religious authority and leadership in Hindu tradition changing in next generations? Because a lot of education came, a lot of awareness came, because of the media and all these things. Yes, I'm hoping that a lot of fraud and trust. What would be the word? All these rubbishes will go away, and more transparent, clean system slate will come up. So how do you see this?
So when I think about the future of women's religious authority in Hindu traditions, I see a landscape of both promise and peril. So let me elaborate. On the side of promise, the very existence of women like Mataji, like Swamini, like Anandmai Guruma, at the top of monastic hierarchies has already shifted imaginations. Girls who visit their centers can see with their own eyes that a guru or Shankaracharya doesn't have to be male. Women devotees who once thought their only spiritual path was as a wife and mother now see the option of sannyas as something that belongs to them too. So the promise here concerns the normalization of female leadership at high levels, even if contested. Girls and women today, they understand that it matters symbolically and practically when women occupy institutional leadership. So I also see increasing use of digital media by female gurus and sadhus. They're on YouTube, Facebook, WhatsApp. As a matter of fact, I know what's going on in the community because of WhatsApp. I used to be on Facebook, not anymore, but pretty much all of the gurus that I work with, they do live streams on Facebook regularly. They upload their videos to YouTube. I'm part of a WhatsApp group with 17 different female gurus and sadhus who are always, apprising me of what's going on in the community. But their use of these digital social media platforms is a way for them to reach diasporic audiences, to go beyond India, offering teachings in English and Hindi, and mobilizing support across borders. So that connectivity can amplify their feminist messages, can connect them with the global conversations on gender and religion, and it opens channels for funding and collaboration. Because let's be honest here. You can have a dream and you can want to change systems and structures, but you need resources, i.e. money to do it. And let me also be clear with my audience is that when you become a guru, a female sadhu, typically you are not a wage earner. When you renounce, when you take a ritual vow of renunciation, you are renouncing, working for a living. You're renouncing your former identity as a wage earner, as a householder, even if you're not, formally renouncing your caste identity or caste status, you are renouncing all the things that identified you as somebody who in the world. So, sadhus are not wage earners. They live on a vow of voluntary poverty and simplicity and celibacy. So if they're creating new systems, new structures, new institutions, just think of the financial resources that they depend on to be able to advance not only their theologies, but really their communities. So now let's talk about the perils. At the same time, new forms of hierarchy are emerging. They're not. So the category influencer, for example, it's not neutral. Just like equality, it's not a neutral term. So influencer, this term ties spiritual authority to logics of branding, visibility, and competition. As some women become highly visible religious feminist influencers, others, let's say, for older, less media savvy sadhus, they continue to remain invisible and they can even be squeezed out. So there's also the risk that female leadership gets co-opted into broader nationalist or conservative projects where so-called strong women are celebrated as symbols while demands for deeper structural change become muted. In the diaspora, these dynamics may play out in yet another register, right? It can be shaped by race, immigration status, interfaith politics. So diasporic Hindu communities may embrace female gurus as evidence of Hindus' progressiveness, even as women in those communities navigate tensions between community expectations and the gender norms of their new contexts. So, but what gives me hope are the small, quiet changes I see. For example, a young female sadhu who is the first in her family to go to university, a domestic worker who, through, let's say, Mataji's encouragement, leaves an abusive household and becomes a community organizer, a group of kitchen workers who start to think of their labor as seva, that entitles them to speak in temple meetings. What worries me is the possibility that we will mistake symbolic breakthroughs, one or two highly visible female leaders, that we will mistake that for systemic transformation. The question I keep returning to is, will the next generation of women inherit institutions that are not only open to their presence at the top, but also structured in ways that share power, protect the vulnerable, and cultivate genuine equality? Or will they inherit new faces atop old hierarchies? So the answer, I suspect, will depend on the everyday choices being made right now, being made in ashram kitchens, in monastic councils, in courtrooms, and in online discussions by women and men who are trying to imagine a religious future where women's authority is not an anomaly, but a norm, and in which equality is not only preached in the name of goddesses or cosmic powers, but practiced in the lives of their devotees. So that's how I see the future.